Good morning. This is Sarah Bose. I just wanted to go ahead and talk to you about the Fair Labor Standard Act rule that goes into effect December 1st, 2016. We have a lot to cover today, so let me go ahead and get started. If you do have questions, please use the chat, and we'll go from there. So today's agenda, we have a lot of ground that we want to cover. You'll see that our agenda, we hope to just give a quick overview of what the Fair Labor Standard Act is and how the University of Kentucky plans to comply with these recent changes. We also want to take some time to discuss how this change will directly impact you as employees. And then we will review wage and hour guidelines. These are guidelines for all employees, but it does have some new parameters that non-exempt employees will need to think about a little differently. And finally, I want to be able to have some conversations on strategies for managing the FLSA change, as well as sharing some tools and resources that HR has created to assist employees to transition into a non-exempt position. So the first question is, what is the Fair Labor Standard Act? The Fair Labor Standard Act is a federal law. It actually was established in 1938, so it's not new. The law, or the act, I should say, has established minimum wage, overtime, pay eligibility, record keeping, and child labor standards. So there's a lot in this act. The area that we're going to be focusing on and the area that has been changed is the overtime pay eligibility. So specifically, it really comes down to how an employee is classified into either exempt level position or a non-exempt level position. This is, I guess the best way to think about it is exempt states that employee is not eligible for overtime, and therefore the employee must work as many hours as necessary in order to get the job done. A non-exempt classification means that the employee is eligible for overtime, and therefore the employer must pay the employee for every hour worked worked by the employee. And if that employee works more than 40 hours within a work week, the employer must then pay overtime, which would equate to time and a half. This is the part of the FLSA that has changed, and we'll touch base a little bit more with the details of this. So I think it's important to just state that in May, earlier this year, was when the Department of Labor announced that the change was to occur, and the effective date is going to be December 1st, 2016. So the way that, or the aspect of this ruling that has changed is that really it is how a person is classified. There are two main things that need to happen in order for a person, or I should say a position, to be classified as exempt. The first is a jobs duty evaluation. This just looks at the job duties that are being performed by a position, and specific positions and responsibilities are necessary in order for a position to be classified as exempt. The second portion of that is how much salary that position would be able to pay. In the past, this threshold, or minimum threshold, I would be more accurate in saying, was $23,660. Now, nothing has changed with the job duty evaluation. The only thing that has changed, and that's going into effect on December 1st, is that minimum salary and that minimum threshold. It is now being pushed up to 47,460 or 76, and that means that if there's any position, even if it meets the job duties to be classified as exempt, if it is not paying at least $47,476, then it needs to be paid on an hourly basis, and it will be eligible for overtime starting December 1st, 2016. So I want to just turn things over so that you can see a quick video that has been put together by the Department of Labor. And I think this is a video that does a pretty good job of summarizing what this ruling is and what the intent for the changes have been. So give us a minute just so that we can play this video, and then we'll jump back in. And if you have any questions, we can talk about just what the FLSA is and what changes are due to go into effect.
On the road of life, Sam and Maddie both work hard to make ends meet. Sam's a manager at a retail store. Maddie heads up human resources. They're both trusted with very important responsibilities. They put in well more than 40 hours a week, often 50, 60 or more, but without a dime of overtime, because outdated rules say they earn too much to qualify for time and a half. Sometimes their long hours break down to being paid even less on an hourly basis than the minimum wage. Overtime regulations for white-collar workers are out of date. The current salary threshold is so low that it's often hard for employers to determine who qualifies. That's why President Obama directed the Department of Labor to update the rules, making them simpler for workers and businesses. Now millions of Americans will be entitled to overtime pay when they work extra hours. What does this mean for Maddie and Sam? Well, Maddie earns $40,000 a year. Since that's below the new threshold for salaried white-collar workers, she qualifies for overtime pay. Her employer must choose to pay her time and a half when she works overtime, or raise her salary above the new threshold. Maddie always works hard to meet the needs of her employer, but without a bump up to the new salary level, now working extra hours equals extra pay. To meet the company's needs, Sam's boss shifted some of his workload to other employees. Now Sam doesn't have to work more than 40 hours a week without being paid more. This extra time away from work means extra options for Sam. He'll have more of his own time to spend with family or pursue other professional interests. That's the new overtime rule from the U.S. Department of Labor. It's a win-win for workers like Maddie and Sam, helping ensure that workers who should receive overtime pay get paid for their extra hours.
We're going to go ahead and first, if there's any questions that you have on how, what the actual change to the Fair Labor Standard Act is, please don't hesitate to write in and provide that question in the chat box. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about the University of Kentucky's plan to comply with the new 2016 Fair Labor Standard Act change. And I think it's important to start that there were some balancing guideline principles that our leadership wanted us to take into consideration when looking at how we were going to comply to these Fair Labor Standard Act. The first is making the decision at the lowest level possible. There have been numerous meetings when we developed this presentation a couple weeks ago. There had been well over 40 meetings with universities at the college and the unit level just to understand the preferences, knowing that the supervisors of these positions that could be impacted would have the best understanding of what is needed for the university and for that position to be successful. Although we gathered that information, that was only one piece of the guiding principles that we needed to consider and that leadership wanted us to consider as we were formulating what we could do to comply to these new this new ruling. The second thing that was very important to our leadership is that the employee's experience needed to be neutral at worst. For the university to be as generous as possible in order for us to make decisions. And in doing that, I will highlight some of the things that were certainly important for us, why we worked through what the solution was. The third guiding principle is to minimize potential inequities. We are a very large, complex university with a lot of different job duties and a lot of different job titles, but we needed to make sure that we were very streamlined in our processes and that employees with same job titles would be treated equitably. You'll see that this is a little bit of a challenge when you're thinking about the various things that individuals do, but we had to have some kind of guideline of how we would look at a fair and equitable rollout of this new federal ruling. And last was that there was going to be no central reoccurring funds available to help assist with this mandate, but that if someone wanted to, that any funds that needed to be used were going to be coming directly from the college and units themselves, and they had to be reoccurring funds. They couldn't just be one-time dollars because we had to do this to sustain it for the future. One thing that the federal Fair Labor Standards Act also stated that I did not talk about is that this is going to, the minimum threshold that is now 47.47.6 is actually going to be reviewed and most likely increased on every 3 years. And that was something that we needed to see not only for the short term, but also the long term when we were thinking about how the university was going to comply to this new ruling. So what the next thing that I would say that we did was we wanted to see what was happening just naturally. So if we looked at all of the grade titles across all of the grades and what the salaries how the salaries naturally fell, we found that the majority of employees and positions in grade levels 36 to 43 had salaries that were less than 47.47.6, and beginning with grade level 44, the majority of these employees actually had salaries that were more than 47.47.6, and that was just what was naturally occurring as we were looking for that. So when we saw that and we looked at the guiding principles, the decision was made that the university leadership would recommend to reclassify all positions from up through grade level 43 to non-exempt. Now, grade levels 44 and above may also convert to non-exempt if their salary wasn't at 47.47.6. We know that these need to be looked at more on a one by one occasion, and that employees that are in the same job title would all need to be treated the same. So there is the possibility of someone being paid more than the new threshold, but their job classification is still converting to non-exempt because we needed to treat everyone in that job title the same. And so that's something that's important to note at both of those levels. It's also important to note that any additional review of positions that are grade levels 44 and above, these would need to be reviewed not only by human resources, because human resources is not only going to look at that particular position in that situation, but how it impacts other units in colleges, especially if it has a shared job title. But it was also going to need the approval of the senior leader in that area. So whether that's the provost, the EVPFA, the EVPHA, or the president, we were certainly going to need to make sure that the approval by those senior leaders were also accounted for. So let me just pause and see if there's any questions that we have. And if we don't have any questions, I can talk about how employees that are going to be reclassified to non-exempts will be affected. All right. So we'll go ahead and just move on to how employees are going to be affected and that will be going through this transition. I think the first thing that's really important to highlight that the annual pay will remain the same. And the eligibility for employees in these positions for benefits will remain the same. These are two important things to just underscore because the intent was not to have, like the guiding principle said, have any negative impact on the overall and annual look at those types of attributes to jobs. It's also important to note that the current level of all accruals will remain the same. This is vacation. Most individuals that are hired into exempt level positions started with 3 weeks of vacation, and then after 5 years move into 20 days of vacation. That will remain the same. So if you currently have 15 days of vacation, even moving from your exempt level position to the non-exempt level position, you will remain with the same vacation accrual, and you'll in fact remain on that track. So that means that if you are in year 4 right now, when you finish year 5 and move into year 6, you will also move from 15 days of vacation to 20 days of vacation. That will not change. Sick leave and holiday leave, that is by your FTE, and that will not change with this transition. It's also important to state that you will have the same opportunities for professional development, even if this includes travel. So if you consistently have always gone to a conference, on an annual or quarterly conference, there's no reason why that opportunity shouldn't still be there for you. If you have flexible work arrangements or flexibility that you need and that you've taken advantage of, this change should not change your eligibility for those flexible work arrangements. And last but not least, maintaining the same job responsibilities. You certainly, as employees impacted by this, you might have to do your jobs a little bit differently, but the idea is not to change the responsibilities in this conversion. I will, when we get later into the presentation, I'll show you some great resources that HR's built to showcase how the vacation leave and the pay will be different throughout the year, but at the end of the year, you will remain whole. Now, some of the things that will change, the things that will change is you will receive overtime pay for any hours that you work over 40 hours per week. This also means that you need to work with your supervisor because all overtime hours need to be approved in advance. We really want, and I have done this same presentation for supervisors and managers, and encourage that this is going to be an adjustment for all individuals, and having those open, honest conversations of how you're going to get your work done, and if overtime is going to be an option, having those earlier is going to be a best practice so that you can be successful when those peak volumes or those extra projects or those times of the year come that typically require something more than the 40 hours that you work on a regular basis. It also means that since you are eligible for overtime pay as a non-exempt employee, that means that you will need to be paid time and a half for any hour that you work over 40. It also means a big change will be that you will be paid bi-weekly versus monthly. So you'll be paid more often, but in smaller amounts. And an important aspect is that you're going to need to enter your working time in addition to your leave request on an bi-weekly basis. So currently, as an exempt employee, you would know that yesterday was election day, and so you would need to go in and enter the leave request to ensure that you mark that holiday as an exempt employee. As a non-exempt employee, not only will you need to do that for that holiday or any sick time or any vacation time that you have, but you'll have to do it for all of your working hours. So if you just work a straight 40-hour work week, you will still need to go in, enter that time, and your supervisor will need to approve your time in order for you to be successfully paid. So a big question is, and an important thing for us to continue to talk about is just, will my pay change? So the first thing that's going to have to happen is we're going to, the budget officers across the campus are going to need to look at the annual salary that each individual is making that's going through this conversion, and they're going to have to create and equate that annual salary to an hourly rate. So if you look at this example, if you're paid $40,000 a year, you will then have an annual salary of 40,000, but we have to create an hourly rate, and for this particular example, that would then be 1924. You can easily see this, and there's a calculator we can show you towards the end of the presentation, that if you work 40 hours a week, all 52 weeks, and that's including working time, vacation time, holiday time, and so on, then it would total 2,080 hours. So if you just divide 40 by 2 or 2080, that's how we get the hourly rate. An important thing to say, to kind of emphasize, is that you will be paid 26 times and get 26 paychecks versus just 12 monthly paychecks. So what does this mean? One thing that it means is that 10 months out of the year, you will be paid twice a month. However, there are 2 months that you will actually get 3 paychecks within those months. And so you will be paid more frequently, but it will be in smaller amounts. And to be completely transparent, because it's important for the university to let employees know exactly how this is going to impact them, this does mean that you will get a smaller percentage of your, if we go back to the example that we just talked about, the $40,000 for the year, when you're paid monthly, when you go biweekly for 10 of those months, you will actually be paid, it's about 8% less than what you are currently being paid as a monthly paycheck. But 2 months out of the year, when you get those 3 paychecks, you will actually be paid 38% more on those months. So this will have an impact on your budgeting, how you take out any withdrawals for your bills. We do have a wonderful resource for individuals to take advantage of. We actually have a gentleman by the name of Todd McCauley, who is the financial well-being resource in the benefits office, and he would be more than willing to sit down with you, have a phone call to discuss how you would want to set and readjust your budget to align for this change, because there are going to be things that you need to do in order to prepare and be successful in converting all of your monthly bills to the amount of money that you're going to be getting throughout the year. So let me just pause and see if anyone has any questions. Again, don't hesitate to use the chat button, because I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you. I will say that one thing that I did hear from Todd is that in doing some of these budgets, there's some very good strategic aspects that they can use to still have a budget that will make them successful, but that individuals that are paid biweekly actually have a national percentage of saving more money than individuals that are being paid monthly. So if you haven't reached out to Todd, or you do have questions about your budgeting, I would recommend that you call the benefits office and set up an appointment with him. The other thing that I think is important for us to realize is that your contributions for your benefits are going to change. So since you're going to be paid 26 times a year versus 24 times a year, the contributions to retirement and benefits are going to look a little bit differently. For health, dental, vision, and life insurance, as well as some other benefits, they are only deducted from 24 of the 26 paychecks. So they are always taken from the first two pay checks of every single month. So those 2 months where you actually get 3 paychecks, the third paycheck is not, nothing is deducted for those benefits on that third paycheck. Now, other benefits like retirement, on this slide I have the basic retirement, the 5% of your base, or on this next slide I have also the flexible spending, voluntary benefits, and such as short-term disability, and the other voluntary retirement contributions. Those follow your pay. So every single time you are paid, you actually get a deduction from that paycheck to go into those certain flexible spending account or retirement contribution or whatever it may be. These are automatically going to be completed for you. However, it's something that you need to be mindful of so that you understand how those contributions are going to look, because it is going to be different than how they were in the past. There's not very many people that have a voluntary 403B or a 457B, but the benefit office has recommended that if you have either of these types of retirement accounts, that you work directly with their office to ensure that it's just set up as you desire, because they're normally a dollar amount that is established for each month that is pulled. So if you have one of those, I would recommend that you touch base with the benefits office.
Okay, Sarah, a question. You've been mentioning all the benefits and insurance. What about parking? How is that going to be handled?
That's a great question. Parking is one of those benefits that should naturally and automatically go from being pulled on your monthly check to being pulled in two different checks, or follow your pay, so go across all 26 checks, so that it's just a little bit at a time. So it should automatically be done for you and just split up through all of those paychecks versus just that monthly paycheck. Thanks for the question. Remember, this session is really about getting you the information you need so you can have as smooth as conversion as possible. So keep asking those questions. Another thing that I think it's important to just mention again is that you will be responsible for entering time. I know that this will be a change. Some resources that we have for you that are on the website, and I'll point them out, but I'm going to just talk through them because these are some best practices that I actually do with my team. We have you can download a calendar reminder. This is not only something you can download as an employee, but supervisors can download it. It reminds you that you need to enter your time the Thursday of time entry week. And so that would be entering the time for the week before and then entering time for the week that you're in. So you're actually not only entering the time that you've already had that week, but you're also projecting what you think you're going to be working on Friday. The reason why we push and have everyone really enter that time on Thursday, this allows your supervisor to approve your time on Friday. And then another downloadable calendar reminder that I would recommend you all have is on Monday morning after time entry. And that is where you can go into your employee self-service tab and look at your pay statement and make sure that all the time that you entered, whether it's working time, vacation, holiday leave, that all accumulated to what you anticipated, and that your pay statement is a whole. The reason why Monday is such a good day for you to be able to do this is because if you see something that may not look right, and as you're adjusting, you're going to see stuff that you just want to question and make sure have that security that everything is going as planned. Is that if, let's just say that your vacation leave didn't get approved, or some period of your working time didn't get approved. If you look at that and you see that pay statement on Monday, you can work with your supervisor and you can work with your budget officer to get that all corrected before the end of Monday, so that it won't impact your paycheck for that cycle. So making sure that you take responsibility of verifying that you've entered your time and that your pay statement looks the way that it should are great best practices for you to do on a every other week basis. Now, another thing in speaking about pay is I just want to give you a big picture kind of idea of how pay is going to transition from being paid on a monthly basis to being paid on a biweekly basis. So the first thing to note is that November 30th, so the end of this year, is going to be the last monthly paycheck, and that will pay you for November 1st all the way through November 30th. This will be what you have expected and have experienced, just like you have for the last several months or ever since you've been in an exempt position. On December 16th, this is the date that you will receive your first biweekly paycheck. You will see that you will be paid from December 1st through the 10th. So there is a little bit of a lag. There's only 7 working days that this is being paid out, so it's not a full biweekly paycheck. It is a partial biweekly paycheck. That's important to note because this is not what you're going to see on a regular basis. However, that December 30th is the first full biweekly paycheck that you will receive. And again, you'll see that there is that lag. So you'll be paid for December 11th through December 24th. And that period of time, you'll be paid out on December 30th. Now, in January 13th, that just kind of sticks with the new rhythm of the biweekly pay cycle that you will be on, and then that January 13th paycheck will include December 25th all the way through January 7th. One thing that the university did, if we go back to the guiding principle, that we wanted employees that were going to be transitioning to non-exempt to have neutral at best be the guiding principle that we went on. The leadership approved a transitional payment of 1 week's pay that will be paid out on December 16th. This will ensure that not only are for the month of December that you would get the same amount of money and make you whole as you would if you were monthly, but it will help with that lag period that I was talking about. So that December 16th, you will get paid that 1 week of transitional pay plus those 7 working days that would just naturally have come into that first biweekly paycheck. This, again, is to assist employees transitioning from monthly to biweekly and hopefully help out as we transition into that biweekly schedule. I will state that we were doing some benchmarking just to see how other universities in our area dealt with this. There are a couple universities that have chosen to assist by giving loans. However, those loans would have to be paid back. The university felt like the fairest thing to do with that transition was this one-time payment that does not need to be paid back. So again, if you have any questions, please let me know. But the next thing that I wanted us to discuss was just the wage and hour guidelines. Now, it says wage and hour guidelines for non-exempt employees, but a lot of what I'm going to be talking about does also mean and include exempt level employees too. So what we're going to quickly discuss is just breaks, lunches, working time, and travel time. And the first thing is breaks. Now, breaks, not just non-exempt employees, but all employees need to take breaks. A break means an employee is relieved of their duties. So this is a 15-minute period of time that is actually paid working time that needs to occur every 4 hours. So if you work an 8-hour day, then you would need to ensure that you're taking 2 15-minute breaks. If you work a 12-hour day, then that would bump up to needing to take 3 15-minute breaks. Again, this is just an opportunity for you to step away from the duties that you need to do and be relieved of those responsibilities for a brief time and then jump back into them. It is important to note that the state statute details that you only need to take a 10-minute break, but the university policy is 15 minutes, and so that is what we need to ensure that we take. And again, this is for all exempt and non-exempt employees. The next thing that we need to just touch base on is lunches. Again, all employees need to be taking lunch. I will tell you that this is probably the hardest thing for the transition from exempt employees to non-exempt employees that I have had discussion around. I think that people have gotten really comfortable to grabbing their lunch, sitting at their computer, looking at email, catching up with certain things while they're eating lunch. And this is something that is important for us not to do, because if you think of what non-exempt means, it means that you are paid for every hour that you're working. If you're paid for every hour that you're working and you're sitting in front of your computer checking email, then this means that you are working. So it's going to be really critical for non-exempt employees to truly step away from their responsibility, and that includes checking email during their lunch period. A lunch period needs to be taken between the 3rd and the 5th hour. So if you're only coming in and working 4.5 hours and then taking the rest of vacation time, that situation you do not need to take a lunch. You still need to take your 15-minute break, but you can withgo your lunch. You can't withgo your lunch. It is a state and federal law that you need to take a lunch. Again, the state statute actually is 20 minutes, but the UK policy is a minimum of 30 minutes. Many departments and units actually have hour-long breaks, and a lot of times this is just for overall operations. If you think of the operating hours of a department as being 8 to 5, if you only took a 30-minute break, you would have to figure out how how you're going to keep those bookends covered, because that would either require someone to come in 30 minutes late or leave 30 minutes early. So a lot of times people will have hour-long lunches and make those, kind of staggered so that they can really fulfill the operation hours of 8 to 5. So an hour-long break, lunch also allows people to leave and go get lunch somewhere else other than bringing their lunch, or truly being able to step away, do something productive, and come back. Another question that I get a lot is, would I have the ability to combine my lunch and my break periods so that I can have a longer lunch or come in later or leave earlier? And you cannot do that. You can't combine breaks and lunches. You need to make sure that you utilize them for the intent, and that is just to relieve an individual of the duties that they have. And those are just things that I think come into play. Another question that I've gotten is, we a lot of times eat with the people that we work with, and the people that we work with, the thing that we have in common with those individuals is work. So you may be working or having lunch, and maybe it's with your colleague or your supervisor, and you just naturally talk about an exciting project that's coming up, and you have a lot of conversation. Well, knowing that you need to be paid for every hour that's worked, the question comes up, is that work time, or is that truly a lunch period? And it really comes down to if it's a voluntary conversation or if it's a mandated conversation or a required conversation. If you are just, you go out to lunch with your supervisor and you guys have this great dialogue and it's voluntary on everyone's end, then that is a lunch period, not a big deal at all. But if you have a supervisor that decides to have Thursday as the whole team eats together and we talk about the agenda for the next week, that's when it becomes more of a working lunch, and that's not truly abiding by the wage and hour guidelines that we have outlined here. So if you have any questions, the great resource is compensation for when those things come up, especially the next topic we get into will be travel. But we do have a question that Donna wants to talk to us about.
And Sarah, I think one of your examples, you might have hit on this, but I just want to repeat the question to make sure. So for example, I've gotten used to walking for 30 minutes, then I would take my lunch. So is this no longer an option for me to do this and just not take my 2 15-minute breaks?
So if I understand, I'm assuming that you have a 30-minute lunch. And that you're walking during that time, so one, you get your 15-minute breaks because your 15-minute breaks are yours and they can't be combined. Now, if you walk 15 minutes and you want to do that twice a day, more power to you. Good job. If you are hoping to do a 30-minute walk and then come back to your desk and eat for the next 10 to 15, 30 minutes, is that considered work time? If you're actively working and eating at the same time, then yes, definitely that shouldn't be a problem. I would definitely have a conversation with your supervisor so you guys are all on the same page of when you're taking your lunch and when you are working. Because a lot of times if someone sees someone else eating, they'll say, oh, I'm not going to bother you. I see that you're eating right now. But if you're choosing to kind of use your lunch period a little bit differently, and you're eating your lunch while you are, reading an article or checking email or whatever it may be, that's just going to be something that you really want to make sure that you're on the same page with your supervisor as far as wage and hour. If you are taking that 30-minute lunch break, then you should be good to go. And again, kudos to you for getting out there and walking. We love work-life friendly activities like that. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, please send a follow-up question. And also, I will give you guys my email and my phone number. So if you want to have additional conversations after this session's over, I'd be more than happy to do that too. So one thing that we need to think about when we're thinking about just general wage and hour guidelines is what the UK standard work week is. And it starts Sunday at midnight, or midnight 01, and it goes through Saturday at midnight. And the reason why this is important is really when you're thinking about how overtime and how flexible work arrangement plays into that. So if you work Monday through Friday and you work 40 hours, and then there is an event that your area is hosting on Saturday, if you've already worked 40 hours and you need to do that event on Saturday, then those would first need to be approved, and then two, those would need to be paid time and a half because they would be considered overtime hours. Now, let's just say that you know you want to work the event on Saturday, but your department doesn't have the ability to budget for additional overtime. There's lots of different things that you can do to still have the flexibility to meet those the demands of the job. So you can say, okay, well, the event is going to be 5 hours, and you and your supervisor can talk about, okay, well, we know that I have to work 5 hours on Saturday. Would it be okay if I left 5 hours early on Friday, or maybe on Wednesday, or I came in late, or something of that sort? So you have the ability to flex your time to ensure that at the end of that standard work week that you come in at 40 hours. Now, if you've worked a 40-hour work week and your event is on Sunday, then that actually doesn't impact your work week for this week, but it will impact your work week for next week. And those are some things that really, I think, at least you have to stop and think about it. I had an employee who's a non-exempt employee, and there were a couple of things that he needed to get done on the weekend, and we talked about flexing his time. And at the beginning, he wanted to do something where it was going to be flexed for him to come into work on Saturday, not a big deal. But then he had something personally come up that he wanted to take advantage of, so then it was flexing it on Sunday, which we both wanted him to do. And then we had to think, oh yeah, we have to flex it out of another work week. So those are just things that you need to be mindful of, and you need to really think out and strategize in order to comply to those 40 hours. Now, it's important to note that the university encourages, and I have it in my, I think I have flex time in my work team almost every single week. Flex time is something that the university has a lot, and we talked about how that can be used, but it's time that must be made up within that standard work week. The university does not have comp time. Comp time, and from a presentation I did earlier, is something that is really known for the state to have. And in this presentation that I did earlier, they were telling me that even the state's potentially going away with comp time. And that is where you can use time outside of the work week, but it's time and a half. So the university greatly encourages flex time, but there is no comp time that we have here at UK. Now, alternative work arrangements like working from home, or just always coming in late because you service a certain student population on Wednesday nights or something of those things. Those things, we still have a lot of, you are eligible for that. We still think that those are doable options, whether you're exempt or non-exempt. It's just something that you really need to be in tune with your supervisor, so you're on the same page with. Hopefully that cleared up some just understanding of how flex time works and the standard UK work week. The next thing that I want to go over is travel time. Travel time, and let's just talk about that conference that is a professional development opportunity for you that you go to on an annual year. When you are exempt, it really, you can fly at any time, and it doesn't matter, because the idea is that you're going to do whatever is necessary in order to get the job done. So if you fly on Sunday, you're still expected to work a full work week in order to get the job done. When you're non-exempt, you do have some limitations, because you could be responsible for being paid during that travel time. So if you think about your normal work week hours being 8 to 5, that stretches through all 7 days. So if you wanted to go to a conference that was on let's say Monday, it started Monday evening, but you wanted to get there and early enough so that you can kind of get yourself settled, get yourself prepared, and then be ready to go. And so you left, Monday at 8 o'clock to get, or Monday 8 a.m. to fly. If you're flying between the hours of 8 and 5, then it is considered work time. Now, if you are flying and to this conference and you are working, meaning you're checking email, you're going, you're preparing a presentation, you're prepping for the conference, and in some airplanes, most airplanes that I've been on lately, all of them have Wi-Fi, so it's not unusual that you are truly working and not just traveling. That if you're truly working, no matter what time of the day that it is going to be work time. But for travel time, if you chose to say, you know what, I really want to leave on Sunday just because I would feel more comfortable that I'd get in on time. If you travel on Sunday and you travel from 8 to 5, you will be paid for that travel time between 8 and 5. Now, you will have to ensure that you either flex that time for the rest of the work week so that you don't go over 40 hours, or you will need to make sure that you are approved to going over overtime for that travel. Now, there are some individuals that may say, you know what, I want to get there early, so I definitely want to leave on Sunday, but I would rather spend the time with my family, and so I don't want to take the plane out to the conference until 7 at night. Well, 7 at night, that is outside of the normal work hours, and so therefore that would not be considered travel time. Now, as you will see with the next slide, and also as we discussed before, if you are truly working, meaning that you're on that plane and you're checking email and you're preparing for a presentation or whatever it may be, if you are working, then you will need to be paid for that working time, even if you're traveling outside of your normal work hours. What I would do as you're adjusting to this new kind of way of thinking, when your first traveling opportunity comes up, I would give compensation a call, let them know the logistics of what you're trying to work out, and they will be able to really highlight what is work time and what is travel time and what is time that's not considered work time. A lot of conferences, as you can see on this slide, have built-in socializing opportunities. And if if the event that I was just talking about on Monday actually just has a welcome cocktail hour on Monday night, and that's not required for attendance to go to, it's not something that is considered working time, and so therefore you would not be paid for those hours. Please, if you have questions, write in on the chat box. If not, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn our attention to just thinking about strategies for you to consider when managing this change. So I think the biggest thing that everyone is going to need to make sure that they put a lot of attention to for that first time entry, that first week of December, which, believe it or not, is just around the corner, is that you will want to make sure that you do what your new responsibilities are in entering your work time, and that you work with your supervisors so that they approve your time in a timely fashion so that you feel very comfortable that you are going to be paid for the hours that you worked. Now, one thing that I will say is that on our FLSA website, we also have two videos. We have a video for employees and a video for supervisors of how to enter your time and how to approve your time. You are probably already familiar with how to enter leave requests, and it is a little bit different, not too different. You should be able to be successful in it, but watching the video will help you, give you some best practices of how to go about it. But you'll want to make sure that you know how to enter your time. You'll also want to make sure that you enter it timely. Entering it Thursday is going to be very critical. And then, when you guys are first getting the hang of it, send a message to your supervisor and just say, hey, just want to let you know, give you a heads up that I've entered my working time into the system. If you could approve it so that I can see what it looks like on my side, just as we get kind of used to this new process, that would be great. And then on that Monday, after everything's been entered, to go into your employee self-service tab, look and see. Now, on that first check, you'll see a lot of different things. You'll see your time, your working time that you entered, any leave that you entered, but you'll also see that transitional payment. So it'll be a good test to just get in there, look at it, see what it looks like. And then if you do have any problems, work those out on that Monday. The next thing is something that can be a discussion that you can have today. Start talking to your manager of developing a plan of how you're going to work 40 hours a week. Maybe you have traditionally worked 45 hours each week just to get your job done. So sitting down with your a manager to understand what that's going to look like is going to be very, very key. A great suggestion that I would have is to block off time for lunches. You can also do it for breaks. Breaks are a little bit more flexible. They just have to, you have to those can flow a little bit more, but sometimes if you don't schedule a lunch, that lunch never comes. So we in my office at least live and die by our Outlook calendar. So I would schedule that and it can be flexible. It has to be something that you, your department, and your supervisor all agree upon, whether that needs to be staggered so that everyone's kind of on for your customers at a certain time. That might be a little bit more strategic of an approach that you'll want to take, but the least you'll want to do is at least put that time on your Outlook calendar so that other people aren't trying to put a meeting on for that time or trying to ask for you to, do a quick huddle or something of that sort. It just makes everyone aware so that they can be more successful in supporting you in the transition that you're going through, but also just to be on the same page with your manager. This is, you know, something that they need to be aware of too. And sometimes if they have 10 people in their office and they're all, you know, taking different staggered lunches, they may call a meeting and not realize that they are going through someone's lunch period because it wasn't on the Outlook calendar. So that is a very good best practice that I would encourage you all to do. I'd also, we are, you know, with smartphones, we're all guilty of it. We check our email, look and see what is happening. And for me personally, there is a little tiny red bubble that comes up every single time I have a new email. And when that happens, it's it's like a immediate reaction for me to go and check what that email is. And so we might need to, as employees and as managers, change the way that we use our devices outside of that traditional working hours or those established working hours. One thing that we do have on the website for a resource is how to turn off your push notifications, that little red number that I was talking about. For me, I always find it to be most painful when I've entered vacation and I just see that number climbing and climbing and climbing. It certainly does not give me that relaxing feel that I had hoped for my vacation day or my vacation week. It probably builds more anxiety, and I keep thinking, how high does it go before it turns off? But believe it or not, you can turn this off. And it is a good practice for you to do so that you are not, you know, driven to look at emails. We also are giving the same advice to managers to not send emails after traditional working hours for your area. You know, employees want to do their best and they want to respond to the work that's being asked of them or to a question that's being asked of them. And so it's going to be really important for supervisors not to kind of engage in that you know, that connection outside of the time, and be respectful to these new parameters that are set forth. So it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy, but it's certainly something that I think can help everyone in that work-life balance and potentially make us more efficient. So that's another strategy that we're certainly sharing. The other thing that we mention here is to really understand and get on the same page with your manager of how you need to complete your daily tasks. Not that this is in question, but you know, in an exempt position, you were just expected to get everything done. And that there was no questions asked, but there was also no time limitations on that either. So you were able to kind of do what you needed to make that happen. It is a great practice to sit down and find out what are the must-haves. What do I need to do in order to, you know, if there was only one thing I had to get done, what is that going to be? What are higher priority items versus lower priority items? A big one for my area is establishing new customer expectations. If customers, we had, you know, shared with them that we would get back to them in less than 24 hours, maybe that needs to be adjusted to 36 hours. We're not sure yet. We're going to see how these changes impact just those types of expectations, but that might be a good conversation for you to have with your departments. And then also streamlining. Is there technology that you can use to make things go a little bit faster? Are there some things that we can do maybe less frequently, or is there things that can be done and enhance overall efficiency with the process? Hopefully these are the kinds of conversations that you can have with your managers so that you can still feel just as successful in your job, you know, after December 1st as you do today. other thing that we spent a lot of time today talking about is workplace flexibility. Sometimes just knowing and having that flexibility and understanding that flexibility will allow people to be more productive. So how does your supervisor want to entertain and talk about flex time? How can it be utilized? Personally, Human Resources has a policy that says that non-exempt employees can take up to 2 hours of flex leave within a given week. I've already started to have some conversations about if that should be increased to 4 to 6 hours because we now will have a bigger population that are non-exempt with different responsibilities that 2-hour flex leave might not be able to accommodate as easily. So having an understanding of how that flex leave can be utilized will be a big one. And then overtime, when and how will overtime be approved? If there is someone that's out on FMLA, or if you are down a staff member, will overtime be an option, or will it not be an option? For me, we are trying to figure out, anytime I have a staff member or a vacancy, I should say, I know that I'm trying to build a budget so that I can really be in a position that I can approve overtime for specific projects and peak volume, and be very strategic about when I do it. And then have ongoing conversations about your managers. It's not easy to talk to your manager or supervisor about your workload. It's never easy to say that I don't think I can get everything done, but having these conversations earlier and more often will help everyone understand what needs to happen in order to get the job done for your unit or your team on a daily basis or weekly basis. But you got to have those conversations so that people know what you're dealing with transitioning to this new limitation of how many hours you can work per week. So again, I'm going to stop to see if there's any questions and just give you a few minutes to type in. If you don't have any questions, one thing that I can do is I can walk you through some of the resources that we do have on our website. So I will get us to review what these resources are, and if you have questions, feel free to use the chat box at this time. But I do think that the Fair Labor Standard Act, one, this is on the HR's homepage. You can also get to it by just doing uky.edu/HR/FLSA. The website has, frequently asked questions. These are questions that have been asked. If we are seeing a trend of a particular question, we do add questions to this, and have added some questions as people have started to reach back to us. We also have tools that I've spoken about for several different best practices. And let me just demonstrate a couple of them. One, the biweekly calendar. The biweekly salary calculator. So if we know that we make $35,000 annually, and we know that our gross income with $35,000 on a monthly basis. So you'll see, January 31, we were always expected to get $2,916.67. This was the breakdown of what that is. Well, now that I'm going to be paid biweekly, what does that look like? Well, you can see that you'll get 2 payments. These are actually the payments and the pay dates for 2017. You will see that this year, June is the month that we are paid 3 times. So you'll see how that is broken up into 3 different payments. And at the end, it should be the annual salary that you are making at this time. Another tool that I just want to bring to your attention. Those videos that I talked about for inputting your time, they are also here. Let's just go to the what employees should know. So honestly, you can go to any part of this site. You can see what we think your manager should know. We wanted to make this site as comprehensive as possible, and also for you to not only get information by reading, but you'll see that we've created specific videos specifically for employees and managers. Feel free to watch any and all of those. Here's some information of just who's affected, the bi-weekly paycheck schedule. You can see the what we were just talking about with the new biweekly pay schedule. You can also go right to the calculator that we just looked over. This is inputting your time, the videos that I was talking about. We also mentioned vacation accrual. So you will still be getting and be on the same track that you are now of either 15 days, or on the bottom of this, it will say 20 days of how many how much vacation that you currently have, but it will look different. You can see here that each month you accrued 10 hours of vacation. So on December 30th, you would have expected 10 hours of vacation. It's not going to look exactly like that. You'll see that you're accruing on every single paycheck. So here it's 4.62. Well, 4.62 plus 4.62 does not add up to 10, but that's because, again, since it follows the paychecks, we get 3 accrual rates in the month of June. So in the end, you will still get 120 hours, but it will be accrued a little bit differently. So that's just another thing that I want to be very transparent about to help you understand how this change will impact you. Another, let's see, I'm going to go back to the main page. This is the video that we watched together, and some additional resources that are here. That's all for you to look at when you are interested and ready. If you have any questions, I mentioned I would give you my my phone number and my email address. I would be more than happy to have additional conversations with you. Again, my name is Sarah Bowes, and my email address is sarah.bowes@uky.edu, and that's Sarah with an H, so sarah.bowes. If you wanted to give me a phone call, I'd be more than happy to chat with you. The phone number that you can reach me at is 257-9184. I hope that today's session has been informative and has helped you answer some of the questions that you might have. I hope you also take some time to look at the Fair Labor Standard Act website that we've put together. And if you still don't have your questions answered, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and I hope that you have a great day.